the ocean can be a deceptive place. I've always found it haunting how a beautiful, clear morning can mask hidden dangers. It reminds me of the story of Anthony White, a marine biology student in California. He knew the risks, he respected the ocean, and yet, he ignored the warning signs that summer morning in 2014, paddling out near a seal rookery. It was a decision that tragically foreshadowed the great white shark attack that would soon follow. Surf Beach, California, was bathed in sunshine that day. Anthony, a 22-year-old with a passion for surfing, was exactly the kind of person you'd expect to find there. He'd been surfing for 8 years. Friends described him as fearless but also deeply respectful of the ocean. He had an infectious enthusiasm and a tendency to seek out remote breaks. He was methodical too, always researching surf spots and ocean conditions before paddling out. This particular dawn patrol session had been weeks in the planning. It was meant to be the perfect combination of his two passions, surfing and marine biology. He arrived at Surf Beach just as the sun was rising, spending the first hour checking conditions and waxing his board. But he was restless, telling other early morning surfers that the real waves were beyond the crowded spots, despite the area being right next to a massive seal rookery at Point Conception. That morning, Anthony set out early, carrying his 6.2 shortboard and minimal safety gear. He signed the beach access log, indicating he planned to surf the main break. But somewhere along the way, he spotted what looked like perfect waves breaking further offshore. Despite the prominent warning signs about marine life in the area, Anthony paddled out about 150 yards from shore to position himself. I can almost see it. The area was beautiful, too beautiful to resist. Seals were barking in the distance, and the crystal-clear water revealed the sandy bottom below. But as he was setting up for the perfect wave, he should have been alarmed. The water was unusually quiet. There were no other surfers in sight, and the seals had stopped their constant chatter. But he was so focused on catching the wave that he ignored these warning signs. Finally, he was perfectly positioned, sitting on his board, legs dangling in the water. Then a terrifying silence fell over the ocean. And then, out of nowhere, it was there. A massive great white shark emerging from the depths, a mere 20 feet below him. What Anthony didn't fully realize, in that moment, was that he had entered the domain of one of nature's most efficient predators. Great whites are, in a way, living fossils, virtually unchanged for millions of years. Their torpedo-shaped bodies are perfectly designed for explosive attacks. These apex predators can detect blood from up to 500 yards away and sense the electrical impulses of a beating heart from several meters. When hunting, they approach from the depths in bursts of speed exceeding 35 miles per hour, using the element of surprise to deliver devastating attacks with bite forces reaching up to 4,000 pounds per square inch. Anthony reacted instantly, but there was nowhere to run. The massive predator struck from directly below, covering the distance between them in a split second. He managed to see the shark's massive form just before impact. The attack came with such explosive force that both he and his surfboard were launched into the air. The sound of his screams cut through the morning silence as the shark's jaws clamped down on his torso. He fought desperately, punching at the predator's snout as it held him in its powerful grip. The massive head shook violently as razor-sharp teeth sliced through flesh and bone. The great white released Anthony after several seconds, typical behavior for these predators when encountering unfamiliar prey. But the damage was already catastrophic. Blood immediately began clouding the pristine water. Despite his severe injuries, Anthony began paddling frantically toward shore on his damaged board. The shark circled below, following the blood trail but maintaining its distance, waiting to see if this strange prey would weaken enough to approach safely. He managed to cover nearly half the distance to shore, his movements becoming weaker and more erratic as blood loss and shock overwhelmed him. A jogger on the beach heard his desperate screams and immediately called for help, but the remote location meant rescue was still minutes away. By the time lifeguards arrived, Anthony had disappeared beneath the surface, the ocean swallowing him whole. 2 hours later, his mangled surfboard washed ashore, bearing the unmistakable crescent-shaped bite marks of a great white shark. The massive gouges told the story of his encounter with one of nature's most efficient predators. His body was never recovered despite extensive search efforts. The university established a memorial scholarship in his name, and Surf Beach was temporarily closed while marine biologists studied great white activity in the area. The attack led to enhanced warning systems and additional safety briefings for surfers. And as the sun sets over the California coastline, the memory of Anthony White serves as a stark reminder. I've always been drawn to stories where the beautiful and the terrible collide. The ocean, for all its majesty, is a stark reminder of nature's power to both create and destroy. And sometimes, that power manifests in the most brutal ways imaginable. On the morning of September 3, 2015, Galveston Bay, Texas seemed idyllic. The sky was a perfect blue. A gentle breeze whispered across the Gulf Coast, creating ideal conditions for fishing. 26-year-old David Walter, a first-generation immigrant who'd poured his heart into his charter fishing business, couldn't have asked for a better day. He was taking 4 tourists from Dallas out for what he hoped would be the fishing trip of their lives. David was known for his infectious enthusiasm and uncanny ability to find fish. Friends described him as methodical and safety-conscious, a man who checked his equipment twice but was also driven to give his customers an unforgettable experience. These particular tourists were celebrating a bachelor party, and David had promised them some action near the Galveston jetties. The morning started well. They spent hours pulling in red snapper and speckled trout, the cooler steadily filling with their catch. David navigated to his favorite spot, just a mile offshore, where the depth dropped to 25 feet. Attracting schools of bait fish and the predators that hunted them. The tourists were ecstatic, already talking about booking another trip. But then, disaster struck. The boat's engine coughed, sputtered, and died, leaving them drifting in the strong Gulf current toward the busy shipping channel. David quickly diagnosed the problem: a clogged fuel filter. Usually a simple fix, but as he worked, the boat's anchor began dragging in the powerful current. The situation was becoming dangerous, and David knew he had to act fast. He'd heard warnings from other charter captains about unusual activity in the area, but such warnings were common in those waters. Recent storms had made the water murky, making it harder to see what might be lurking beneath the surface. David had fished these waters for years without incident, reasoning that the popular fishing spot would be safe with other boats nearby. His clients growing increasingly nervous, David made a fateful decision. He stripped down and dove overboard to manually reset the anchor, hoping to stabilize their position while he fixed the engine. What David didn't know was that he had entered the hunting grounds of one of the Gulf's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. Bull sharks are incredibly adaptable killers, equally at home in salt water and fresh water. Specialized kidneys allow them to regulate salt levels in their blood, enabling them to swim far up rivers and into freshwater lakes where other sharks cannot survive. This means they can appear virtually anywhere there's water, from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Their aggressive temperament and willingness to investigate anything in their territory makes them responsible for more unprovoked attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. They possess a bite force of 1,350 LEBs per square inch and electroreceptors that can detect electrical fields from several meters away. Bull sharks employ a relentless bite and release pattern, striking multiple times with the tenacity of a pit bull until their prey stops moving. David worked underwater, trying to free the stuck anchor, but the current was stronger than expected, and the anchor was wedged in debris. Unbeknownst to him, a 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the fishing grounds for hours, drawn by the chum slick created by David's successful charter. The predator's incredibly acute senses detected the electrical fields generated by David's rapidly beating heart and the scent of blood from hundreds of yards away. What happened next unfolded with shocking speed. David never saw the shark coming through the murky water. The bull shark struck from behind, its massive jaws clamping down on his leg with crushing force, before immediately releasing and circling for another attack. The impact was so violent that David's clients heard his muffled scream through the water. David fought desperately to reach the surface, but the bull shark continued its relentless assault. True to their species' aggressive nature, the predator struck again and again, each bite tearing away more flesh. The shark's persistence was terrifying. Once committed to an attack, bull sharks rarely give up, continuing until their prey stops moving. The multiple attacks created a feeding frenzy, and the murky water became a churning mass of blood and violence. David's clients watched in horror as the water around their boat turned red. They screamed for help and radioed the Coast Guard, but David had already disappeared beneath the surface, overwhelmed by the bull shark's relentless assault. The Coast Guard arrived nearly an hour later, finding only David's torn shorts floating in blood-stained water. The bull shark had vanished into the murky depths, leaving behind only traumatic memories for 4 witnesses. There's a story they tell in every boating safety course along the Texas coast, a cautionary tale. It's about David, whose body was never recovered from the Gulf. His charter business died with him. But thousands of miles away in Hawaii, another predator was about to show why it earned the most terrifying nickname in the ocean. This time, the attack would happen under cover of darkness, where even paradise becomes a hunting ground. The evening of April 22nd, 2016, brought perfect conditions to the remote coastline near Hana, Maui. A gentle wind rustled through the palm trees as the sun painted the sky. Christian Smith, 24, couldn't have asked for better conditions for his solo fishing adventure at one of his secret spots along Maui's untouched coastline. Christian embodied the laid-back Hawaiian lifestyle that drew so many to the islands. With his easy smile and encyclopedic knowledge of hidden fishing spots, he had become a local favorite at the surf shop where he worked. Friends described him as fearless and independent, always venturing to remote locations that other anglers avoided, constantly searching for the perfect fishing experience that only the islands could provide. That evening, Christian loaded his truck with heavy tackle designed for the large predatory fish that hunted Hawaiian waters after dark. The location he'd chosen was breathtakingly beautiful but completely isolated. A secluded beach accessible only by a rough dirt road winding through dense tropical vegetation. Christian arrived just as darkness was settling over the ocean. The spot was perfect. A protected cove with deep water close to shore and a coral reef that attracted schools of bait fish during night hours. He set up his gear methodically, rigging the heavy equipment he'd need for the monsters that prowled these waters after sunset. As Christian waded into about 6 feet of crystal-clear water to cast beyond the reef break, everything seemed perfect. The water was so clear he could see the white sand bottom, even in starlight, and he'd already landed 2 nice fish when disaster struck. Moving through the water to reposition for a better cast, Christian's foot slipped on wet volcanic rock. He fell hard against sharp coral formations, opening a deep gash on his leg. Blood immediately began streaming into the pristine water around him. Local Hawaiian fishermen had warned about increased predator activity during night hours, but Christian had fished these waters countless times. What he didn't know was that the remote location had become a hunting ground for one of the ocean's most dangerous predators. As Christian tried to assess his injury in the dim light, he realized the cut was deeper than expected. His splashing and the metallic scent of blood created the perfect storm of stimuli that trigger a predator's hunting instincts. Unknown to Christian, he had attracted the attention of Hawaii's apex predator. Tiger sharks are perfectly adapted for nighttime hunting in both shallow and deep waters, earning the nickname wastebasket of the sea, because they'll eat virtually anything. Their stomachs have contained license plates, tires, and even other sharks. These massive sharks can grow up to 18 feet long and possess an indiscriminate appetite that makes them particularly deadly during nighttime hours when they move into shallow water to hunt. Tiger sharks can detect blood from several hundred yards away, and their lateral line system senses the slightest vibrations in the water, making escape nearly impossible once they lock onto a target. Christian began wading toward shore, but his movements became increasingly erratic as blood loss affected his coordination. The coral cut was more serious than he'd thought, and the metallic scent drifting through the water was like ringing a dinner bell for every predator in the area. The 10-foot tiger shark had been patrolling the reef edge when Christian's blood trail reached its sensitive nostrils. Unlike more cautious reef sharks, tiger sharks are known for their bold, reckless approach to anything in their territory, especially during nighttime hunting hours when they become most active. Christian never saw death coming through the dark water. The attack was sudden and devastating. The tiger shark struck from the side, its massive jaws clamping down on his injured leg with crushing force. The impact knocked Christian off his feet, sending him tumbling in the deeper water. The predator's attack was relentless and indiscriminate. Tiger sharks are known for their tenacious grip, often holding prey while using their muscular bodies to roll and tear. The shark maintained its grip while striking with its powerful tail, creating a whirlpool of violence. What makes tiger shark attacks particularly horrific is their feeding behavior. Once they taste blood, they enter a feeding frenzy, biting repeatedly until prey stops moving. Christian fought desperately, but the predator's grip was unbreakable, and each movement only intensified the attack. I've seen the sea claim those who loved it most. Christian, for example. His screams on that remote Hawaiian beach, they echoed, but no one was there. The tiger shark, with its indiscriminate appetite, left no escape. They found his truck, his fishing gear, but Christian was gone, taken by the very waters that brought him joy. A massive search followed, helicopters, hundreds of volunteers. 4 days later, they found him, just 8 miles away. The community held a traditional blessing. His surf shop colleagues created a memorial fund for ocean safety. But it isn't just the tiger sharks. Off the rugged Northern California coast, the same species that took Anthony White was about to show that even the most seasoned watermen aren't safe from the ocean's intelligent predators. I remember November 8, 2017. It was crisp, autumn in Fort Ross, Northern California. The morning fog lifted, revealing that dramatic, rocky coastline where Pacific swells crashed against the sea stacks. Ryan Walsh, 29, couldn't have asked for better diving weather. Calm seas, good visibility. It promised a profitable day, harvesting abalone, those prized mollusks commanding high prices. Ryan, he embodied the dangerous life of a commercial abalone diver, his weathered hands, his sun-damaged face. They told the story of 6 years spent in those frigid Pacific waters, free diving to depths that would terrify most recreational divers. Friends described him as methodical, safety-conscious. But he was also driven, obsessed with finding the perfect abalone beds hidden in those rocky depths. That morning, Ryan launched his small boat with Marcus, his dive partner, a younger diver who looked up to him. They'd worked together for 3 seasons, developing that wordless communication that comes from sharing danger in one of California's most hazardous occupations. Ryan chose a productive rocky reef in about 25 feet of water. It was a challenging spot. Strong currents, kelp forests, and the ever-present danger of getting tangled in abandoned fishing nets. As Ryan suited up in his thick wetsuit, he felt that familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The water was a bone-chilling 55 degrees, but he'd built up a tolerance over the years. His dive bag held his abalone iron, measuring gauge, and collection bag, the tools of his trade. The first few dives went perfectly. Ryan descended through the kelp canopy to the rocky bottom, where clusters of red abalone clung like living jewels. His experienced eye identified the legal specimens, and his practiced hands pried them loose with surgical precision. But on his seventh dive, disaster struck. Working to free a particularly large abalone, Ryan's fin became entangled in abandoned fishing nets. That nearly invisible monofilament wrapped around his leg like a spider's web, holding him against the rocky bottom as his air supply ran dangerously low. After a desperate struggle, he managed to cut through enough netting to break free. He made an emergency ascent, lungs burning as he fought through the kelp toward the sunlight. When he finally surfaced, he was exhausted, disoriented, and dangerously far from his boat. What Ryan didn't realize was that his distressed movements had attracted the attention of California's apex predator. Great whites, living fossils, really. They've patrolled these waters for millions of years, perfectly adapted to hunt in the kelp forests where seals and sea lions gather. These massive sharks, typically 12 to 16 feet long and weighing over 3,000 pounds, are capable of explosive bursts of speed. Their incredible sensory systems allow them to detect electrical fields from meters away and track blood trails from over 500 yards. During autumn, mature great whites patrol northern California in greater numbers, following the migration patterns of their prey. They're incredibly intelligent, capable of learning and adapting their hunting strategies, which makes them unpredictable and extremely dangerous to humans who venture into their territory. Marcus, watching from 300 yards away, immediately recognized that something was wrong. Ryan floated motionless at the surface, clearly in distress. Marcus started the engine and raced toward his partner, but the distance seemed impossibly far. That 13-foot great white had been patrolling the kelp beds when it detected Ryan's emergency ascent. The shark's acute senses picked up the electrical impulses from his rapidly beating heart, the scent of abalone in his collection bag, and the erratic movements of a creature in distress. All triggers that activated its predatory instincts. Ryan never saw the attack coming. The great white struck from below with devastating force. Its massive jaws clamped down on his torso with a bite force reaching 4,000 pounds per square inch, slicing through his wetsuit and into vital organs. The shark's initial bite was exploratory, typical great white behavior with unfamiliar prey, but the damage was already catastrophic. The predator released Ryan and circled back, following the blood. I'll never forget the story of Ryan. His screams, they say, echoed across the water. He was fighting to reach his partner, but the blood loss was too much. Marcus pulled him from the water, but it was too late. 20 minutes after the attack, he was gone. It sent shockwaves through the abalone diving community. New safety regulations were put in place, and Marcus, his partner, became a dive safety instructor. The beds at Fort Ross were temporarily closed, but while those great whites patrolled California's kelp forests hundreds of miles south in Florida, the same species that claimed David Walter was about to turn a spear fishing competition into a feeding frenzy. And this time the attack would unfold in crystal clear water, where every horrific detail would be visible. August 14th, 2013. Perfect conditions greeted Jupiter Inlet, Florida. The morning sun sparkled on the emerald Atlantic waters as gentle swells created ideal visibility for the annual South Florida spearfishing tournament. Alex Paul, 33, couldn't have asked for better conditions for one of the region's most prestigious underwater hunting competitions. Alex, a construction foreman from Miami, was deeply passionate about spearfishing. Weekends were spent free diving, honing his breath-holding abilities and perfecting his aim. Not a professional, but his athleticism and experience earned him respect. That morning, Alex joined 40 other competitors at the tournament briefing. Cobia, kingfish, and grouper were the target species, prized game fish commanding high point values. Alex had scouted extensively and identified promising spots where large fish were likely to be found. The competition began at sunrise. Alex and his dive buddy Carlos headed to a productive reef in 30 feet of water, where baitfish schools attracted larger predatory species. The water was exceptionally clear, with 80-foot visibility. For 2 hours, Alex had moderate success with smaller fish. But as the morning progressed, he focused on finding a trophy fish for the top prizes. And then he spotted it. A massive cobia cruising the reef edge, easily 50 pounds, worth maximum tournament points. Alex hyperventilated to extend his bottom time, then dove to intercept the fish's path. His shot was perfect, striking just behind the gills. But the wounded fish immediately took off for deeper water. In the excitement, Alex became separated from Carlos and the other divers, finding himself alone in an isolated reef section. The wounded cobia's struggle created a significant blood trail as Alex fought to control the powerful fish. When he finally surfaced with his prize, he was bleeding from cuts caused by the sharp fins, exhausted from the underwater battle. The combination of fish blood and human blood, along with the continued struggles of the dying cobia, created the perfect stimuli, triggering the predatory instincts of every shark in the vicinity. Alex didn't realize he had attracted one of Florida's most dangerous predators, the bull shark. Bull sharks are perfectly adapted to Florida's warm coastal waters, possessing a remarkable adaptation that allows them to survive in both saltwater and freshwater. They typically reach 6 to 8 feet. Their specialized kidneys regulate salt content in their blood, enabling them to appear anywhere from the open ocean to golf course ponds miles inland. Their incredible sensory system allows them to detect vibrations from struggling fish hundreds of yards away and sense electrical fields from several meters distance. Unlike other shark species that may be more cautious around humans, bull sharks are known for their bold, direct approach to potential food sources, often competing directly with spear fishermen for their catch. Their aggressive nature and opportunistic feeding behavior, combined with their ability to strike repeatedly, makes them one of the most feared predators in American waters. This particular 7-foot bull shark had been patrolling the reef when the blood scent reached its nostrils from hundreds of yards away. The predator's acute senses detected electrical fields generated by both the struggling fish and Alex's rapidly beating heart. Alex saw the shark approaching. He tried releasing his catch, hoping to distract the predator with the wounded cobia. But bull sharks are opportunistic feeders with insatiable appetites, and multiple potential prey items only intensified their aggressive behavior. Instead of taking the offered, the water turned crimson so quickly. A bull shark, clamping its massive jaws on Alex's leg with crushing force. It's a scene I've tried to imagine countless times, trying to understand the sheer brutality of it. The attack, they said, was swift, major blood vessels severed, tissue damage extensive from the shark's multiple strikes. Alex fought back, punching at the shark, trying to reach his knife. But the bull shark, relentlessly aggressive, struck again and again. Divers, alerted by the commotion and the spreading blood, raced to help. They found him unconscious, his spear gun and the wounded cobia nearby. The shark was gone, leaving behind only the terrible evidence of its attack. Despite immediate first aid and a Coast Guard helicopter evacuation, Alex died from massive blood loss during the 40-minute flight to the trauma center. The tournament was canceled, and the spearfishing community mourned one of their most respected members. His death, though, led to something positive, at least. Enhanced safety protocols at tournaments, requirements for closer proximity to dive buddies, emergency response training, a memorial fund established to promote safer diving practices. It's a small comfort, perhaps, but a legacy nonetheless.